Mein Lebenskampf ist nicht umsonst gekämpft. Denn so wir zeigen, soll er vor sich hertragen und wir werden in unserem Zeichen wieder siegen.
We've all heard of the grotesque acts of the Holocaust under Hitler, but the brutality of history gets so much worse than that. Many of these leaders didn't just stop at genocide, they wielded their power with devastating cruelty. The sheer number of lives claimed by these dictators is beyond horrifying, representing a scale of death and destruction that is difficult to fully grasp. But what's truly sickening is the brutal methods they use to execute their victims. Join us as we unveil some of the deadliest dictators you have ever imagined. Number 10. Mao Zedong, China. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, near Shaoshan village in Hunan province, China. His father, Mao Yichang, started as a poor farmer but became one of the richest landowners in the area. While working on his father's farm, Mao read a lot and became politically aware through a booklet by Zheng Guanyin, which criticized the decline of Chinese power and supported democratic reforms. He also explored Western ideas by reading works from authors like Adam Smith, Montesquieu, and Charles Darwin. Mao admired historical figures such as George Washington and Napoleon Bonaparte for their military and nationalist achievements. His political views were further shaped by the Gelao-Hui protests, which arose after a famine in Changsha, Hunan's capital. In 1911, Mao began middle school in Changsha, a city full of revolutionary energy against the rule of Emperor Puyi. Many there supported Republican ideas led by Sun Yat-sen, a Christian educated in America who led the Tongmenghui Society. Mao was inspired by Sun's newspaper, The People's Independence, and even wrote an essay supporting Sun to become president. As a sign of rebellion, Mao and a friend cut off their traditional pigtails, a sign of submission to the emperor. The revolutionary spirit led to the Xinhai Revolution, which saw southern China rise against the emperor. Mao joined the rebel army as a private soldier, though he didn't take part in fighting. After the revolution succeeded, Sun Yat-sen, as provisional president, made a deal with the monarchist general Yuan Shikai, who became president of the newly formed Republic of China. With the revolution over, Mao left the army in 1912 after just 6 months. Around this time, he discovered socialism through a newspaper article and read pamphlets by Jiang Kanghu, a founder of the Chinese Socialist Party, but remained unsure about the ideology. On October 1, 1949, Mao announced the creation of the People's Republic of China, PRC, a Marxist-Leninist state under the CCP. He solidified his control through various campaigns, including land reforms and the suppression of opponents, which led to millions of deaths. Mao played a key role in the early years of the PRC, pushing for economic changes, starting large projects, and managing complicated international relations during the Sino-Soviet split. His policies included the Great Leap Forward, which led to a severe famine and millions of deaths. In 1963, Mao started the socialist education movement, followed by the Cultural Revolution in 1966, aiming to remove counter-revolutionary elements and promote his ideology. During his rule, China's population grew from about 550 million to over 900 million. Mao's policies caused a huge number of deaths, with estimates ranging from 40 to 80 million people. The death rate was put at 8%. These deaths were due to starvation, harsh punishments, forced labor in prisons, and large-scale executions. The number of deaths from starvation during the Great Leap Forward is highly debated. Until the mid-1980s, when the Chinese government finally released official census data, little was known about the extent of the disaster in the Chinese countryside. The few Western observers allowed in were taken to model villages, where they were misled into thinking the Great Leap Forward was a success. Number 9. Genghis Khan Mongol Empire. In 1162, In what is now Mongolia and Siberia, a fierce leader named Genghis Khan was born. Known for his harsh conquests, he founded the largest empire ever seen. Within just 25 years, his Mongol army took more land than the Romans did in 4 years. By the time he died in 1227, his empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, covering around 10 million square miles. This made his empire as big as Africa and larger than the US, Canada, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean combined, making Genghis Khan one of history's greatest military leaders. Born in Temujin in 1162, he was the son of a local chieftain. Legend says he was born holding a blood clot, a sign of his future greatness as a warrior. After his father was poisoned by a rival tribe when Temujin was just 9, his family was left alone. They had to survive on their own in tough conditions. During this time, Temujin killed his half-brother for hoarding food, which helped him take control of his tribe. However, a rift grew between Temujin and Jamuka, leading to a split in their tribe. When they fought again, Jamuka's men defeated Temujin's tribe, capturing and executing Temujin's generals. Angered, Temujin vowed revenge. In 1204, he faced Jamuka in a crucial battle. Using clever tactics, Temujin's forces defeated Jamuka's army. Jamuka was later betrayed by his generals and executed when he refused Temujin's offer of mercy. In 1206, Temujin was named Genghis Khan, or Universal Leader, and he turned his focus to China. The Chinese cities were well defended, but Genghis Khan's army used captured Chinese engineers to build siege equipment and cut off the city's supplies. Eventually, the city fell, and Genghis Khan's reputation as a ruthless conqueror grew. His empire expanded into Europe, showing no signs of stopping. 30 to 40 million deaths were said to have happened during Genghis Khan's campaigns. Genghis Khan died in 1227 during a campaign in China. His last words were about leaving a vast empire but not enough time to conquer the world, leaving the rest to his son. He was buried in an unmarked grave, with those who arranged his funeral executed to keep its location secret. His legacy includes not only his vast empire but also his many descendants. Studies suggest that 1 in every 200 people today is related to him. Under Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire became a diverse and advanced society, valuing merit and religious tolerance. He created a legal system with uniform punishments, helped unify the Mongol tribes, and protected merchants, which revitalized the Silk Road. This allowed for the exchange of goods and ideas between East and West, influencing future civilizations and sparking the Renaissance. Number 8. Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin was born on December 18, 1878 in Gori, Georgia, which was part of the Russian Empire at the time. He grew up in a poor family and at the age of 7 got smallpox, which left his face scarred. However, Stalin was drawn to radical ideas and joined a secret group that wanted Georgia to be independent from Russia. He began reading the works of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin, which influenced his political views. In 1901, Stalin joined the Social Democratic Labor Party and became involved in organizing protests and strikes against the Russian Tsar. He was arrested in 1902 for his activities and sent to prison. Stalin later joined the Bolshevik Party and played a major role during the Russian Revolution of 1905. He impressed Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin with his skills in organizing meetings and strikes, as well as his ruthless methods for raising funds, such as a major bank robbery in 1907. Around this time, he adopted the name Stalin, which means man of steel in Russian. During the Russian Revolution of 1917, Stalin managed the Bolshevik newspaper Pravda. By October, the Bolsheviks had taken control, leading to a civil war which they eventually won. In 1922, Stalin became General Secretary of the Communist Party and used this position to consolidate power. After Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin ensured that his rival, Leon Trotsky, was removed from power and exiled. By the late 1920s, Stalin aimed to rapidly industrialize the Soviet Union through 3 5-year plans. These plans greatly increased the production of coal, oil, steel, and electricity. However, workers who didn't meet production targets were either executed or sent to labor camps. Stalin also introduced collectivization, taking land from peasants and turning it into large collective farms. This policy led to widespread famine and millions of deaths, but Stalin viewed it as necessary for his plans. The population of the Soviet Union was estimated at around 162 million. Stalin's regime was attributed to around 20 million deaths in the ratio of about 12%. Stalin created a cult of personality with his image displayed everywhere and became increasingly paranoid. In 1934, he had a key party member, Sergei Kirov, assassinated, seeing him as a threat. Throughout the 1930s, Stalin purged the Communist Party, executing or imprisoning many members, including 81 out of 103 generals in the Red Army. By 1939, Stalin made a pact with Nazi Germany, but when Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Red Army was caught off guard due to the previous purges. As his health worsened in the early 1950s, Stalin became even more paranoid, even suspecting his doctors of plotting against him. He ordered new purges, which caused panic among Communist Party members. Before these purges could take place, Stalin died of a stroke on March 5, 1953. At his funeral, a huge crowd surged forward, resulting in the deaths of around 500 people. Number 7. Adolf Hitler, Germany. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a town in what was then Austria-Hungary, now Austria, near the German Empire's border. In the early 20th century, Hitler lived in Vienna before moving to Germany in 1913. During World War I, he served in the German army and earned the Iron Cross for bravery. After the war, he joined the German Workers' Party in 1919, which later became the Nazi Party. By 1921, he was leading the Nazis. In 1923, he tried to take over the government in Munich but failed and was sentenced to 5 years in prison, though he only served a bit over a year. During his time in prison, he wrote the first part of his autobiography and political book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. After his release, Hitler gained support by criticizing the Treaty of Versailles and promoting his extreme views on German nationalism, anti-Semitism, and opposition to communism, often claiming that communism was part of a Jewish conspiracy. By November 1932, the Nazi Party had the most seats in the Reichstag, though not a majority. With no coalition able to form a majority, former Chancellor Franz von Papen and other conservatives persuaded President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor on January 30, 1933. Soon after, the Reichstag passed the Enabling Act, starting the transformation of the Weimar Republic into Nazi Germany, a one-party dictatorship based on Nazi ideology. After Hindenburg died on August 2, 1934, Hitler became both the head of state and government with total control. His early years in power saw economic recovery from the Great Depression, the removal of post-World War I restrictions on Germany, and the annexation of areas with large German populations, which gave him significant popularity. One of Hitler's main goals was to expand German territory in Eastern Europe, a plan he called Lebensraum, living space. His aggressive foreign policy is seen as the main cause of World War II in Europe. On September 1, 1939, he invaded Poland, leading Britain and France to declare war on Germany. In June 1941, Hitler ordered an attack on the Soviet Union, and by December 1941, he declared war on the United States. By the end of 1941, German and Axis forces controlled much of Europe and North Africa, but these gains were slowly lost. In 1945, the Allied forces defeated Germany. On April 29, 1945, Hitler married his longtime partner Eva Braun in the Führerbunker in Berlin. The next day, to avoid capture by the Soviet Red Army, they committed suicide. Following Hitler's wishes, their bodies were burned. Under his rule, the Nazis committed genocide, recording about 17 million deaths with a population of about 79 million. The death ratio was put at around 21%. Number 6. Leopold II, Belgium. Leopold was born in Vienna as his parents' third son and was initially set to become a clerk. He was educated with a focus on theology. Between 1885 and 1908, Belgian King Leopold II ruled the Congo Free State personally, giving him total control over its resources without answering to anyone. Leopold II became king in 1865, succeeding his father. Belgium, a young nation formed after the 1830 revolutions, had recently broken away from the Netherlands and was recognized as a neutral and constitutional monarchy. Leopold faced opposition from his government, who thought colonialism was outdated and had little interest in his ambitions. To get around this, he focused on the Congo, an unexplored area in Africa. In 1876, he organized a geographical conference in Brussels to legitimize his plans. He created a front organization called the Association Internationale Africaine, later the Comité d'études du Haut-Congo, and then the Association Internationale du Congo, which he claimed was dedicated to ending the East African slave trade, ensuring free trade, and promoting humanitarian policies. This was meant to distract critics and justify his actions. In 1878, Leopold hired journalist and explorer Henry Morton Stanley, who had previously explored the Congo, to survey the area. Stanley built roads, established posts, and made treaties with local chiefs, who were often unaware of the full implications of what they signed. The scramble for Africa led to the division of the continent at the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, where Leopold used clever diplomacy to secure the Congo River Basin, renaming it the Congo Free State. He became the absolute ruler of this vast territory, 8 times the size of Belgium. Despite agreements to root out the slave trade and protect local rights, Leopold ignored these and focused on making the Congo profitable, mainly for rubber. The local people were forced to meet brutal quotas for rubber collection under dire conditions. Those who failed faced severe punishments, including beatings, mutilation, or death. Leopold's private army, the Force Publique, enforced these quotas with extreme violence. They even severed hands as proof of killing villagers who didn't meet their quotas. Leon Rom, the ruthless administrator of the Force Publique, was known for his brutal methods, including decorating his garden with severed heads and maintaining a gallows outside his home. While Leopold amassed great wealth, the exploitation exhausted resources and led to the suffering of many. He borrowed money from the Belgian government in 1889 and 1895, promising to cede control of the Congo in 1901. However, when the time came, the government decided not to take over, allowing Leopold to continue his exploitation. With a population of about 20 million, it's estimated that up to 10 to 15 million people died due to forced labor, violence, and famine. The kill-to-population ratio was at 50 to 75%. By November 1908, the Belgian government forced Leopold to relinquish control, and the Congo became a Belgian colony starting November 15, 1908. Number 5. Hideki Tojo, Japan. Born in Tokyo in 1884 to a military family, Tojo was immersed in the values of loyalty and discipline from an early age. His education at the Imperial Japanese Army Academy and Army War College showed his dedication and intelligence. These formative years shaped his views on Japan's role in the world, which influenced his future decisions and policies. Tojo's military career saw rapid promotions and important assignments, placing him at the center of Japan's expanding empire. His roles in Germany, the Kwantung Army, and Japan's invasions of Manchuria and China highlighted his belief in military expansion and the creation of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, aiming for Japanese dominance in Asia. Moving into politics, Tojo's appointment to high-ranking government positions led him to become prime minister. His time in office saw aggressive Japanese expansionism, including the attack on Pearl Harbor, driven by a belief in a swift, decisive war for dominance. However, the reality of prolonged conflict and Allied counterattacks weakened Japan's strategic positions and led to criticism of his government's handling of the war. As the war progressed, Tojo faced increasing challenges both domestically and internationally. The loss at Midway and relentless Allied advances weakened Japan's military position, while criticism of his government's management led to his resignation in 1944. The impact of his leadership lingered, contributing to Japan's eventual surrender in 1945. The population under Japanese control was around 100 million. 5 to 6 million deaths were estimated due to Japanese war crimes in Asia. Kill-to-population ratio was put at 5 to 6%. Tojo's trial and execution marked a significant part of his biography, representing the end of Japan's wartime aggression and the international pursuit of justice. After the war, Tojo was held accountable for leading Japan through a period marked by atrocities. His trial by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, IMTFE, in 1946, often called the Tokyo Trials, charged him with war crimes, including the attack on Pearl Harbor. Tojo's defense argued that Japan's actions were for self-defense and justified by the emperor's authority, but the tribunal rejected these claims. On November 12, 1948, Tojo, along with other high-ranking officials, was found guilty of waging aggressive war and committing atrocities. On December 23, 1948, Tojo was executed by hanging, symbolizing the end of an era defined by militarism and aggressive expansion. Number 4. Pol Pot, Cambodia. Saloth Sar, better known as Pol Pot, was born on May 19, 1925 in a village named Prek Spauv, about 100 miles north of Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. In 1934, Pol Pot moved to Phnom Penh, where he spent a year at a Buddhist monastery before going to a French Catholic primary school. When Pol Pot returned to Cambodia in January 1953, the region was in chaos, rebelling against French rule. Cambodia gained independence from France later that year, and Indochina followed the next year, splitting into Vietnam and Laos. During this time, Pol Pot joined the Communist Khmer People's Revolutionary Party, KPRP, founded in 1951 with North Vietnamese support to fight against the French. From 1956 to 1963, Pol Pot taught history, geography, and French literature at a private school while secretly planning a revolution. During the Vietnam War, Cambodia became a safe place for communist Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces, as the U.S. was not allowed to operate there. The Cambodian leader at the time, Prince Norodom Sihanouk, played a political game, supporting various groups as it suited him, including the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot. In March 1969, U.S. President Richard Nixon ordered a secret bombing campaign in Cambodia to disrupt the enemy. Over 4 years, U.S. planes dropped 500,000 tons of bombs, more than 3 times the amount dropped on Japan during World War II. This destruction led to an alliance between the Communists of China, North Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. By August 1973, the Khmer Rouge had gained control of 3/4 of Cambodia and began attacking Phnom Penh, the capital. China and North Vietnam were the Khmer Rouge's main supporters. Despite U.S. efforts to supply aid, many Cambodians, including children, starved. On April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge captured Phnom Penh, ending the Civil War. Between 1975 and 1979, the Khmer Rouge's genocide resulted in the deaths of 1.5 to 2.5 million people, almost 1/4 of Cambodia's population of 7 million people. Kill-to-population ratio was put at 36%. tensions with Vietnam increased, and by December 1978, Vietnamese troops invaded Cambodia. On January 7, 1979, they captured Phnom Penh, forcing Pol Pot to flee. China invaded Vietnam in February 1979 in response to the Vietnamese invasion of Cambodia. Millions of Cambodians had died from starvation, overwork, or execution, filling mass graves across the country. Pol Pot's regime controlled every aspect of life, banning money, private property, and religion, while children were forced into military service. In 1979, a Khmer Rouge faction captured Pol Pot, placing him under house arrest. He died of heart failure on April 15, 1998. Number 3. Kim Il-sung, North Korea. On September 9, 1948, in the northern part of the Korean peninsula, the Supreme People's Assembly declared the creation of a new state, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Meanwhile, celebrations erupted across the country. At the heart of it all was Kim Il-sung, a 36-year-old with big dreams, whose name roughly means Kim reaching for the sun. Young, charismatic, and ambitious, Kim was thrilled to be making significant strides toward his dream of a unified Korea and total control. Though Korea would remain divided, Kim's influence in the North would exceed even the wildest expectations. Kim Il-sung, born Kim Sung-ju on April 15, 1912 in a village now part of Pyongyang, grew up under harsh Japanese rule. His parents, patriots and devout Christians, suffered greatly. As a child, Kim learned to play the organ and witnessed his father's suffering in prison for anti-Japanese protests. The brutal scene left a lasting impact on him. Fleeing to China to escape the Japanese, he joined communist guerrillas fighting the Japanese in Korea when he was 19. Years later, North Korea would boast that it was Kim and his guerrillas who freed Korea, though it was mostly propaganda. At 24, Kim was already leading hundreds of men. After the partisan resistance was crushed, Kim and his followers found refuge in the Soviet Union, where he studied Stalin's methods. His first son, Kim Jong Il, was born in a Soviet village near Khabarovsk in 1941, although North Korean propaganda claimed he was born in Korea. When World War II ended in Europe, the Soviets declared war on Japan, and by August 24, 1945, Soviet troops entered Pyongyang, establishing a Soviet occupation zone. This was Kim's big chance. At 33, he returned from exile and began building his power, albeit under Soviet guidelines. By 1948, Kim had a strong army, and the Soviets were pulling out. It was time to take the South, which was under American control. On June 25, 1950, 175,000 North Korean troops crossed the border, igniting one of the 20th century's bloodiest and most pointless wars. The front lines shifted rapidly, and by early September 1950, South Korea controlled only a small area around Busan. By October, Kim was pushed into a tiny mountain strip in the north. China's entry into the war led to more twists, and by 1953, an armistice restored the border at the 38th parallel, exactly where the conflict had begun. Kim's ambitions were thwarted, and his country lay in ruins after massive American bombings. Despite losing 2 million of his 10 million people, Kim responded with intense propaganda, building a godlike cult of personality while brutally suppressing opposition. The secret police, with 60,000 members, maintained control, and people were punished for minor infractions, such as poor quality portraits of the leader. The number of deaths was estimated at 1.6 to 3 million due to famine, purges, and the Korean War. Kill-to-population ratio was put at 16 to 30%. Under Kim Il-sung, North Korea became one of the most isolated and controlled countries. By the time of his death in 1994, he had established a communist dynasty by passing power to his son, Kim Jong Il. Number 2. Saddam Hussein, Iraq. Saddam Hussein, often called the Butcher of Baghdad, can be better described as a dictator who led himself to ruin. Like many tyrants, his rule was marked by oppression, aggression, and violence. However, he stands out from figures like Hitler or Stalin because of his unique approach to cruelty. His name, Saddam, means the one who confronts, and it's fitting given his violent and chaotic rule. Saddam's troubled beginnings started even before his birth on April 28, 1937. His father and brother died of cancer, leaving his grief-stricken mother to believe the unborn child was cursed. She tried to abort him and even considered suicide. After Saddam was born, his mother abandoned him, and he was taken in by an uncle. Although he returned to his mother when she remarried, he faced regular beatings from his stepfather, which might explain his later brutality. At age 10, Saddam fled to Baghdad, a city with modern amenities and a new father figure in his uncle, who was a devout Sunni and war veteran. This environment nurtured Saddam's growing interest in violence. Iraq was a nation in flux, shifting from Ottoman rule to British influence, and Saddam's uncle taught him political ideas and nationalism through pamphlets with extreme views. Saddam's political journey began when he joined the Ba'ath Party, a revolutionary group with a vision of a one-party state. In 1958, a coup removed the Iraqi monarchy, and Saddam participated in an assassination attempt that failed spectacularly. Fleeing to Egypt, he continued his law studies until another coup in 1963 brought the Ba'ath Party to power, though only briefly. In 1968, a coup led by Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, a distant relative of Saddam, gave him a role in security. Saddam's talent for violence and torture made him indispensable. He perfected various methods of interrogation and built a loyal network. By 1979, he maneuvered his way to the top, forcing al-Bakr to resign and establish his dictatorship. Saddam's consolidation of power was dramatic. In a chilling display, he had politicians executed in front of cameras to show his control. While he used oil revenues to improve living standards and gain popularity, his rule was also marked by brutal tactics against enemies and ethnic groups, including the infamous gas attack on the Kurds. Despite his oppressive regime, Saddam's rule continued with vanity projects and military aggression. His invasion of Kuwait in 1990 sparked a massive international response, leading to his eventual downfall. After years of conflicts, including a devastating war with Iran and a brutal suppression of uprisings, Saddam's regime was finally toppled in 2003. The number of deaths was estimated to be 250,000 to 1 million due to wars, purges, and genocides, with a population of about 17 million. The kill-to-population ratio was put at 1.5 to 6%. Saddam was captured, tried for war crimes, and executed. His final moments were marked by defiance, but his reign left a lasting impact on Iraq and the world. Number 1. Mengistu Haile Mariam, Ethiopia. Mengistu Haile Mariam was born on May 21, 1937, in Welaita Kaffa, when Italy was occupying Ethiopia. Stories about his background differ, with some suggesting he came from a family of slaves in the southern region. Mengistu H. Mariam, an army officer turned strict Marxist, was not widely known when he led a coup against Emperor Haile Selassie in September 1974. By 1977, he solidified his power after surviving a gunfight, allegedly killing 5 of his top political rivals. Initially, Mengistu brought major social and economic changes to Ethiopia, transforming its feudal society into a socialist state. The land was taken from the wealthy and given to peasants. During this period, Ethiopia was plagued by uprisings and guerrilla warfare from various political groups. The 2 main factions were the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Party, EPRP, and the All Ethiopia Socialist Movement, AESM. Although both initially supported the Marxist revolution, they eventually became bitter rivals. The EPRP accused the ruling Derg, the government led by Mengistu, of fascism, leading to a brutal guerrilla campaign against the government. In response, the Derg started the Red Terror, a campaign of mass arrests, torture, and executions that lasted 2 years, resulting in tens of thousands of deaths. Families of the deceased were often forced to pay for the bullets used in the executions. Mengistu even turned against his former allies, the AESM, during this time. Throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, Ethiopia was involved in multiple conflicts, including wars with Somalia over the Ogaden region and internal rebellions in Eritrea and Tigray. Despite briefly repelling the Somali invasion and achieving some military successes, Mengistu's regime faced mounting challenges. In 1989, the situation worsened when the Soviet Union, under new policies, stopped supporting Ethiopia. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, and the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, EPLF, launched successful offensives, leading to the fall of Mengistu's government on May 21, 1991. The estimated number of deaths due to political purges, famine, and war was put at 500,000 to 2 million, while the kill-to-population ratio was 1.4 to 5.7%. Mengistu fled to Zimbabwe, where he was given asylum by Robert Mugabe. Despite being protected by Mugabe and living comfortably in Zimbabwe, Mengistu's past crimes caught up with him. In absentia, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for genocide in 2007. Even after Mugabe's fall and Mengistu's death in 2019, he continued to enjoy protection in Zimbabwe. Which of these deadly dictators did you find the most intriguing? Let us know your answer in the comments section.